Alright everyone, I want to do a video now about the pain that I experienced during my first week with MSE, the Maxillary Skeletal Expander, aka the Wan Moon appliance. Now, let me come right out and say that 99% of the pain that I've experienced with MSE, I experienced in the first week. And most of that pain actually was in the first 72 hours. And most of that pain was in the first 24 hours. Because I will tell you, the worst of it is this. If you go in and have a cortical puncture done, which is what I had done prior to MSE install, which means that the orthodontist takes his dental drill and drills small holes in your mid-palatal suture so as to weaken the suture so that the MSE can successfully split the suture. And then he will install the MSE itself, which involves 4 11mm screws. That's, about, or maybe even a little more than a ½ inch. So pretty sizable screws. Now, when those two procedures are done, the cortical puncture and the MSE screw install, you're numb. So the dentist will apply copious amounts of local anesthetic cream to the maxilla. Then he will inject Novocaine into the maxilla, and you are numb. So when the cortical puncture and the MSE install are happening, it's no different than, say, having a cavity filled. It's, definitely nerve-wracking, disconcerting. You can feel the vibrations of the drill. Something is happening. You can feel the mechanics of it, the vibration, and the kind of the drilling of hard materials that's happening, but you're numb, so there's no real pain. Maybe a few zaps and shocks, just kind of like when you're having a filling done. But for the first several hours while you're numb, there's really not much in the way of pain. Now, 3 hours later, Novocaine wears off. The pain starts to creep in, and it is very, very intense. Whether it was the cortical puncture pain or the MSE screw install pain, it's hard for me to say exactly what contributed to what, but as soon as that Novocaine wears off, man, I was just like, Meanwhile, I'm in the car coming up from New York City back to Boston. I have to pull off as the pain starts to kick in, and because there's so much pain that I can't even focus on the road anymore, really. Had to have my father take over. And for the rest of that day, I was pretty much like, holy shit, ow, 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 throbbing, pain throughout the maxilla and just honestly throughout the whole face. And a headache set in for me. Now, the other point I really want to get across in this video is that most of the pain related to the MSE that I experienced was headache pain, which makes me feel like most other people who do MSE, yeah, they're going to feel that local pain in the maxilla and in the cheeks and the mid-face after that Novocaine wears off, and probably for another day or two after. But for people who aren't predisposed genetically to experiencing migraine headaches like I am, your experience with MSE pain will probably be a lot lighter than mine, because in addition to that local pain, I had full-on headache episode kick in as soon as that Novocaine wore off. And this is a fairly common thing for me, right? Like whenever my body goes through shock, whether it be like if I eat a really sugary meal, or if I am sick, like if I have a cold, or super bright lights, super bright noise. Like when I saw John Wick 3 in the movie theaters a couple months ago, it was just like, boom, like sounds, sights, vibration, and it kind of triggered a headache, right? Just too much. Anything that's super intense will set me off. This is fairly typical of any migraineur, actually. They will be set off into a headache by any number of intense stimuli. And MSE pain in that first several days was a headache trigger for me. Now, it was so much so a headache trigger that pretty much for the first 72 hours, I had a constant headache, and I had to continually dull that headache with triptans. Triptans are a known, very common, very effective, in my opinion, miracle migraine drug. It's a vasoconstrictor, which means it constricts your blood vessels, reduces the size of your blood vessels. So for whatever reason, that vasoconstriction has the effect of calming the headache. I used triptans quite liberally that first several days. And I also used my Theracane massage stick. I've had this thing for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. This thing is like my best friend. So I liberally used this to massage my neck and even around my eyes. And then where there was that local pain from the MSE, I just shoved this thing into my face and, you know, worked it like this, just to help press into the pain and kind of ease it. In addition to lots of Theracaning, I took Tylenol, because with MSE, you're not supposed to use anti-inflammatories. Dr. Nuaz specifically said to me, he said, inflammation is key to success with MSE. I don't know why that's true, but it may have to be with the fact that, well, I don't want to, well, I guess I'll speculate. Maybe it has to do with, as that suture is being stressed by the MSE, inflammation occurs at the site of the suture, and then the inflammation itself becomes another splitting force that combines with the appliance to produce that critical suture split. Because as we know, not everyone gets the split with MSE, and we all hope for it, and we all want to do everything we can to promote it, but it's not a guarantee. So I did triptans, I did Theracane, I did Tylenol. Oh, I did hot rice sack. I'll show you that too. This thing was my best friend during that first several days with MSE. Put this thing in the microwave for 2.5 to 4 minutes, and then you just, like this, and you just chill like this in bed. In the heat, man, the heat really brings a lot of relief to that MSE pain. So definitely anyone considering treatment, consider getting one of these ahead of it for that first few days after the MSE install. Now, after 3 days, that intense, unceasing pain just sort of dropped. And by Wednesday afternoon, so on Wednesday morning, I had a physics lab. Late Wednesday morning, I had a 2-hour physics exam. By Wednesday afternoon, my body was like, okay, you know what? We're okay. You know, we can stop freaking out now. This thing is definitely lodged into your skull, yes. But after all, there aren't really any nerves that run through there, because if there were, I mean, I would be in constant pain because the screws would be pissing off those nerves. But yeah, so my body was like, okay, this happened and time to move on. And Wednesday afternoon, I felt quite normal, right? And so I then, so for those first few days, I should say, there was so much pain for me that I was like, oh my God, am I even going to be able to go through with this? Am I even going to be able to turn this appliance? Because every time I turned the appliance, the pain got worse and the headache got worse. So then I would turn it back to 0 and it would kind of chill out a little bit. So I was thinking to myself by that 3rd day, I was like, wow, maybe this was not the right thing for me to do. Maybe I can't handle this. Maybe my headache condition is going to prevent me from going through with MSE. Maybe this idea of like splitting the skull, it was just too much for my sensitive body. And I was thinking, wow, maybe I should just drive back down to New York and have this thing removed and count my blessings. Yeah, my maxilla is not as expansive as I want it to be, but I just can't handle the MSE. But that 3rd day came and things chilled out, and I was like, you know what? Let's make a second push. because the cortical punctures were still fresh. Because I asked Dr. Z, I said, Dr. Z, my orthodontist, Dr. Nawaz, I said, you know, how much longer until the cortical punctures heal and solidify and become useless? And he said, well, you know, you really want to get that MSE splitting force going within that first week, because yeah, the cortical punctures, they're going to start healing, and then they will no longer be there to your advantage. So when that third day hit, I was like, you know what, I gotta do this. I gotta take advantage of that cortical puncture. Let me try turning the appliance. So I turned the appliance. Immediately, my body was like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to split your skull? And it started freaking out. And I was like, chill, body, chill. You can do this. And I keep an oxygen tank here in my room, pure welder's oxygen. And I've often used it to abort migraines, because when those headaches start coming on, a lot of times the body starts freaking out and goes into a kind of subconscious panic mode, and the pure oxygen helps chill it out. So I went over to this oxygen tank after that first turn. I'll just demonstrate. So after turning the appliance for that first time, in order to chill my body out so that it wouldn't freak out and go back into headache mode, I huffed oxygen for 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, I felt great. Okay, my body did not ignite into this episode, right? I successfully nipped that panic in the bud. I said, well, what about another turn? I turned again. Immediately my heart rate started increasing. My body started freaking out. 5 more minutes of oxygen. Combined, by the way, I should add, with mewing chin tucks in order to press the tongue basically onto the MSE and onto the surrounding maxilla to help the MSE push into the maxilla. 5 minutes later, I felt great. Another turn. Another 5 minutes of oxygen. Lo and behold, 7 turns that day, and I felt fine with the help of the oxygen. And granted, after all that, I definitely did some hot rice sack on the face just to because the tension started building up pretty intensely. 7 turns on the MSE, that's almost a whole millimeter of MSE expansion, and all of that was just, that energy was built up within the maxilla, and specifically the suture. So I texted Dr. Z that night, Dr. Nawaz, my orthodontist. I said, hey, is it all right if I do, 5, 6, 7 turns a day? If I get the split, will the tension release and will I be sort of over the hump? Dr. Nawaz, can I sort of pack all of these turns into a finite period of a couple of days where I take pain meds and I rest? I've got a few days off from school. Can I cram all these turns in, get that split, and then have things get much easier after the split occurs? He said, well, Dr. Juan Moon himself actually in adults recommends up to 5 turns per day. And yes, after the split occurs, things will get easier. So I had done 7 turns. He said, I don't think that's the end of the world. Just let's try to keep it to 5. At that point, game was on. I was like, all right, I'm going to get this damn split before I go back to school on Monday. Whatever it takes, I'll turn the hell out of this thing. I'll do tons of oxygen. I'll do pain meds, and I'll chill the fuck out while I wait for this thing to split. So I did 7 turns that first day, all interspersed with oxygen and the hot rice sack. The next day I did 6 turns. Again, oxygen, rice sack, Theracane. Day after that, 7 more turns. And after that third day of 7 turns, I was chilling out by the pool with my cousins, my aunt and uncle, who were up from Florida. We were having a pool day. They had no idea that I was dealing with like this tremendous amount of tension in my face. I was kind of just playing it cool and wanting to be normal, chilling with them, right? And all of a sudden I feel like this thing shoot across my maxilla. And all of a sudden a bit of a release throughout my entire face. And I'm like, holy shit, was that it? And I'm like poking around with my tongue. I'm like, oh my God, that feels amazing. Huh. I think that shit just split. 20 turns. I come inside, I look in the mirror, and I see a gap. Not between my 2 front teeth, but between 2 teeth to the side. I believe teeth 7 and 8. And from that point going forward, my pain, it dropped off of a cliff, right? Leading up to that moment where the suture split, the pain was at its worst, and then it dropped off steeply. The next day, I wasn't sure the split had occurred, right? I saw a gap and I definitely felt something that felt like a split, but I wasn't sure. So the next day, I actually turned it 7 more times. And the turns were a lot easier. There was a lot less tension. It was still a good amount, but like something had changed. And by the end of that 4th day, 26 turns in, I looked in the mirror and I saw a diastema between my 2 front teeth. I saw that a gap had definitely formed. And at that point I knew the split had happened and that I was over the hump. So after you get the split, it's only 1 turn per day. So compared to what I was doing, right? Compared to that first 3 brutal days of recovering from the puncture and the screwing in of the appliance, and then 7 or 6 turns per day for 4 days, 1 turn a day since then for the past several weeks has been a cakewalk. It's like there's not even anything there. So for anyone who's concerned about MSE pain, yeah, it happens. But in my case, I front-loaded all that pain into the first week. And since then, the pain has been like, it's been, a little bit like, yeah, there's definitely this hunk of metal in my mouth and it's annoying. It cuts my tongue a little bit, yada, yada. And yeah, when I turn in the morning, there's a little bit of tension, but it pretty much disappears after like 10 seconds. And then I get more of a kick out of the fact that my maxilla is expanding and I'm gaining oral volume and I'm gaining nasal passage volume. It feels good when I turn it. It feels like things are improving. It doesn't feel like tension is building up and it's like, my skull is splitting. No. That feeling was restricted to the first week. So for anyone who has MSE or is considering MSE, I encourage you to be aware that the pain is real, but be aware that it's temporary and that this is a classic case of sacrificing short-term happiness for long-term happiness. Ajahn Jeff, the abbot at the Buddhist monastery that I lived at, used to say, wisdom is the ability to sacrifice short-term happiness for long-term happiness. Well, if you can deal with 1, maybe 2 tough weeks with MSE, and you can get that split, then man, I can attest to the fact that the oral volume that results, right now I'm at like, I think about 6 millimeters of expansion with MSE. The oral volume makes mewing so much easier, makes nasal breathing so much easier. I can see my arch getting significantly wider. It's starting to look different. I'm even starting to sense that my mid-face is coming out and starting to look different. All of these benefits I'm getting because I was able to endure that first week of hell. So I encourage you to be strong and do the same if you feel inclined to do so. Or if you're an MSE patient who is coming upon this video because you Googled MSE pain, which I did. That first week I Googled, I was like, MSE pain, trying to figure out if my pain was normal. I found nothing anywhere online. No one had posted about MSE pain anywhere, like maybe a sentence or two on thegreatwork.org. So I hope this video can benefit future MSE patients who are dealing with that pain right now, letting you know there is light at the end of the tunnel, to just hang in there. All right? That's it for now. Peace out.